Yeah.
Right. Got it.
Billy, I like the questions you sent, but I will admit I know pretty much nothing about college tennis. And so Bobby and I discussed originally, I said, hey, look, you know this guy well, you guys are going to communicate well, and let's just have the questions there on Bobby's screen and he will run it. I'll give a quick little hello in the beginning and Bobby will run through your questions. He'll kick it back to me for my King of Tennis question and we will be done.
Great. Yeah, you guys feel free to ask whatever you want. I just was giving maybe some, just some bullet points that you could think about. Bobby and I obviously, we're in grad school together. We were more or less consider ourselves sports business professionals, I guess you could say, before we really got back into the tennis space. So kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about that. I think that's an interesting origin story for everybody. All right, let's see how big that is for you, Bobby. If you can, I don't know that I have the ability to make it any bigger.
No, I can see it.
Got it. Okay.
Bill, I don't know if you know about, I've had 2 eye surgeries. Reading is, I can see far away. I can't see up close. They give you a choice of which lens to take.
Yeah.
And I took the far away lens.
I'm with you. Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to have LASIK. I don't know that I'm a candidate, but I've got these readers that I can't really live without the readers. They're just 1.5, but man, we're all getting old.
We are getting old. Well, that's Sean, are you ready?
I am giving you some separation in the picture, in the questions. I was looking at it thinking that's a giant paragraph of jumbled gobbledygook. So
but I can see the numbers in between them, so I'm okay there.
Yeah,
this is actually from this length, I can see perfectly. So
that works well. Okay.
Yeah, that works well.
And we're there. We got that, and we might be good to go. So I will run this. I want to see that. I don't know what it looks like on this, but we're good. All right, so I'm recording. We got everybody's separate audio and we are okay. So now that we're live on YouTube, we will say hello to everybody there, which is basically hi honey, basically my wife. And then Instagram as well. I'm just trying something for fun. We're testing the Instagram IGTV or something, whatever the live Instagram looks like. We don't have a lot going on other than just our deals post that ends up going there for GoTennis. Don't have a huge group of followers, maybe about 50 or so, and get to do a lot of the testing of things and say, hey, this is early, and we'll get better and better at it as we go. So Billy, you're our first test subject of the Instagram live. So we will see what that looks like later. Don't worry, if it's terrible, I'll delete it. So we're pretty comfortable. And like I said, you, Bobby, are close. So I think this is going to be a fun conversation. And I would love to just hand it over to Bobby. So I'm going to do a nice, simple introduction of Billy Pate. You are the head men's coach at Princeton University for tennis. And that is as much as I know. So what I want to do is say, Billy, will you introduce yourself? And I'm going to let you and Bobby talk for a while.
Yeah, great. Well, hey, I really appreciate you guys having me on. And Sean, nice to meet you. And Bobby, obviously, it's great to catch up after a few years here, and good to see you. But I'm in my 11th year at Princeton as the men's coach. Been coaching college tennis, I think, for about 28, 29 years. So I'm getting to be one of the older guys. I used to be one of the younger guys in the business, but now I think I'm one of the senior guys. But anyway, it's been a fun ride, and I just appreciate you guys having me on, and anxious to talk to you and see what we can uncover here.
Well, Bill, it's great seeing you too. It's funny, Sean, we always prepare questions for everybody. You were kind enough to prepare some questions for us. And I told Sean, I said, I have to make this a little bit personal, just because the shocking, as you mentioned a couple minutes ago, we've known each other more than 30 years now.
Yep.
It's a long time. And I tell everybody, and I don't know if I ever told you, I just remember meeting you. I started, I think, a quarter before you. We were in grad school together at Georgia State. I think I started the quarter before you. We were in some summer class. I believe that's when you began. And I noticed this, we were having a group discussion, and the chair coming closer and closer to me. And I look over and I see this person, and I said, after you said about 5 words, I said, oh my God, this is somebody I'm going to know for the rest of my life. And the impact, when you get right to it, you sit there and say, and I don't want this to be about me, but I got to share this. Billy essentially has shaped my life. You can sit there and say, you know, people have had an impact. Yes, I went to grad school. We wanted to be in the sports side of business, but Billy got me playing tennis again. Billy got me my first job in tennis. Through Billy, we met, you know, had great times with the Atlanta Thunder. Through Billy, I met great guys from Mississippi State. I mean, we had an apartment where 5 people lived, and it was me and 4 Bulldogs, and, you know, had great times personally and professionally. So you sit there, one person had an impact. I would say, Billy, you probably had the biggest impact on my life outside of parents that you could possibly have. And since I pretty much enjoy my life, I want to thank you for it, because it's been a fun ride.
Well, that's a really, really kind, Bobby. I had no idea that was to that extent. I just remember us being roommates in grad school, and dragging you out to the tennis court. I decided to start hitting balls again. I think after college, I was a little burnt out. As you said, we were all going to be sports professionals. I was probably not thinking I would be in the tennis space. Actually, I really wanted to be in, you know, maybe the NFL as a PR person, or even athletic administration, be a director of athletics. Not that seeing the way college athletics going, I wouldn't want to do that today. But no, I remember dragging out to the tennis court, and it was remarkable how well you could hit for a guy that didn't have an extensive playing background, and incredible technique. And so it was really fun. We started hitting a little bit, and I think you kind of got the bug again, and realized, you know, you're in a perfect spot. And so was I. At Atlanta in the, you know, I know it's still to this day, but I think particularly in the early 90s when we were there, and this started this venture, it was just booming in tennis. I mean, you would go out in Buckhead and you'd meet people, and, you know, if you're a tennis pro, you might have the same respect as a doctor. It was kind of strange. It was a unique place, and I know it still is, and with Alta and the passion for tennis. But yeah, that was a fun time, a great memory.
It's funny now. I saw that you guys just recently played Navy, and I know Will Seagrave's son plays on Navy, and Will was somebody we used to hang out with in Buckhead, and now you're coaching against his son. So it was like, oh my gosh, yeah, the time marches on.
Yeah, that's funny. I've had so many people that were, I guess, contemporaries of mine who all their kids are coming up. And, you know, a lot of times especially if they're academic, you know, they'll reach out, and it's a great reason to catch up with these, you know, good friends I haven't talked to in years, but their kids are of age. Maybe they're looking at Ivy League schools, maybe not even for an athletic spot, but maybe just to, you know, just want some information, or doing tours. Or I've had a lot of, you know, Ken Small Jr.'s son, you remember, he was a good football player. He ended up going to Georgia and not playing football, but he had offers to go Ivy, and so he did the tour. So it's been great to even be up here. There's been a deep connection with a lot of friends, but it just again shows my age. I've been doing this a long time, where my friends' kids are in college now. So
well, it's hard. Well, let's go back, because it's always fun when you become a coach. People forget that you were on a darn good Mississippi State tennis team.
Yeah, it was really fun. You know, when I actually ended up, as you know, going to high school in Starkville, and so it was sort of a natural. I went there, and ended up when I first started, we weren't great. You know, we were I think building a pretty good team, and then, you know, by the time I left, we were a really good team, pretty much a top 10 team. And then from that point on, you know, Mississippi State's been really super competitive nationally in tennis, and a lot of French guys came. In fact, again, going back, one of the guys I picked up at the airport January my senior year, who helped us really make that push to be great, his son came and worked for me, you know, so last couple of years. So and he's in coaching, so it's funny. But yeah, it was a great program. It was really fun. And like I said, then I, you know, wanted to get a master's, and that's how we met, and moved to Atlanta. And it was a great time to be there. And you know, and of course, we had pro league in Atlanta at the time too, which was really successful. So it kind of got me back into tennis after kind of a little bit of hiatus, because like I said, I was sort of burnt out. We had such a good program, but I was like, I'm not going to go pro. I did play a few pro events, but I'm just going to focus on my career. And but then Atlanta drugged me back into tennis, to be honest with you. So it's really cool.
Well, Sean, the first time we played, again, talking about the old days of Atlanta, Billy's like, well, I live out here. What exit did you live off of when the first apartment you had?
Yeah, Northridge exit on Dunwoody. Yeah, going up Georgia 400. That's before the toll was even there. You had to enter, I think 400 North there, right at the top end of the perimeter in Sandy Springs. Yeah.
So I had been in Atlanta 6 months. I had never been outside the perimeter until then. So he was the apps. I'd heard about OTP. And when I went to see Bill, I was like, where in God are we? Because the buddy of mine that I went to TCU with, who was the one who was my introduction to Atlanta, he lived in town. So I was very familiar with in town. And the first time I went out, and I remember we were going to hit, and I went out with my Prince 110 aluminums, and Billy looked at him and said, oh my God, it has been a long time since you played. And immediately gave me 2 of his rackets out of his bag. He said, here, keep these, you'll need them. So immediately, the kindness was very well evident. And then obviously, should we go even, you brought up Ken Small. So Atlanta Thunder was another fun, very tennis oriented experience for all of us.
Yeah, that was great. Again, that's probably what really drew me back into tennis. They had a opening for like a facility manager, operations director, and working for the World Team Tennis, and I'm sure it's the same today, but it's like working for a minor league baseball team, and you do a little bit of everything, which is actually really cool. Like if you go work in professional sports, you're an intern, you're probably in a very specific space where working there. And Ken Sr., the owner of the Atlanta Thunder at the time, he also did the Kuppenheimer Classic. That was also kind of his bread and butter with it was a one-day basketball doubleheader, and it used to be in the where the Hawks played the old Omni, and then it became in the Georgia Dome, and it's crazy to think the Georgia Dome is gone now, and it's the Mercedes Arena. So yeah, so that was a really fun time, getting a chance to do anything. And what I really valued about that experience is I got to get back in tennis, but also Ken Sr. was, even if you were an intern or a first year employee, if you had an idea, a marketing idea, promotional idea, a lead on a corporate sponsorship, which we obviously all needed, he was all ears. And we'd spend many hours at the old Beer Mug. I know it's not there anymore, but off Peachtree Road there, that was an amazing place. I was really saddened when I heard that closed years back, but we'd have our meetings late into the night there, brainstorming ideas. And the funny thing about the Thunder, we actually joked it became, Thunder became synonymous with rain, because every time, and I really felt bad for Ken. I mean, he had put his money into this, and it was hard enough to draw crowds to watch tennis in Atlanta, which seems counterintuitive. But Bobby, as you know, even with the AT&T Challenge for many years, and of course the event that's the Truist event that Eddie Gonzalez has run for many years. I know he just kind of retired from that, moving to a different venture, but he did a great job. But I know it's a challenge in Atlanta you have to have the marquee names to really get people to come, because we always said this, people want to play tennis in Atlanta more than they want to watch, unless you have a marquee name. 50 in the world doesn't always attract the fans in Atlanta, but we had that issue. Of course, we had legends, like we had Navratilova played for years with the Thunder, and Borg came in, had some really fun with them, working with them, and we were drawing well when it didn't rain. But I remember just being for 2 seasons in a row, I think more than 50% of the matches would get rain in the summer. It'd be a 7:00 Tuesday night in Atlanta. All of a sudden the showers would come, and it was very bad timing or unfortunate, but those were really fun times. It was sometimes it was like Keystone cops running around when they were painted, trying to find another venue or what we were going to do. But it was a really, really fun time in my life, for sure.
It was, and you're right. I mean, you think about when I first got to Atlanta, I swore, because of the summer of 94 and 95, that, as you said, every day at 5:00 it just rained.
Yeah.
95 was horrible. I remember, because my brother came down, and Billy got my brother an internship at with the Thunder. And so my parents came down to visit us, and literally we were inside the entire time they were here because it rained. So yeah, summer of '95, yes, was absolutely horrendous when it came to the weather, which made it. And you brought up an interesting point, because I don't think the Smalls get enough credit, because they really started that trend with the Kuppenheimer Classic as well. That weekend before Christmas basketball tournament, UCLA co-opted, NBC took it over. But they were the first ones to do it, and it was a great thing.
Yeah, Ken had some great marketing ideas, and things sometimes work for a reason, sometimes they don't. Obviously, this is well before social media. What could we have done with social media? But what was cool though is I remember the last year that I was involved with the Kuppenheimer, and the Olympics were on the way, and that was one of the excitements. That we go back. That's when I moved to Atlanta. I'm sure you thinking the same thing coming from TCU. The Olympics had already been announced clearly years before. Everybody was building toward the Olympics. I think we tend to forget how big that buildup was. Everybody wanted to be in Atlanta in sports and work for ACOG, which was the Olympic Committee for the Atlanta Games. And it was what was really funny. I did a little side note here that I think people might find humorous. With my name was very close to the guy that was the executive director of the Olympic Games, which is Billy Payne. Of course, he was the top guy at the Masters at the club there in Augusta. And but I would call people to try to get maybe a corporate sponsorship for the Thunder or the Kuppenheimer Classic, and I would be patched right through, because the receptionist wouldn't understand. She would think I'm Billy Payne when it said Billy Pate. So I just started kind of saying my last name really quick and hoping they did think I was Billy Payne. And many times they go, Mr. Payne, I'll put you right through. And they're like, oh, this is easy. So that was a funny thing back then. It was quite a time though, but the buildup was great with the Olympics on the way, and just everybody. I think it really put Atlanta too. I mean, obviously when you host the Olympic Games, that's a major international venue, but it really it put Atlanta sports on the map, and so many good things happened after that.
And Sean, we were so involved because we were in grad school. We created a program with the Sports Council of Atlanta where we essentially did all the logistics for each monthly Sports Council meeting. Plus, we had all of our fellow students in various internships, so we were the guys to know. You wanted tickets, you wanted to meet this one. We knew somebody everywhere, as Billy said. Plus, that was like 90. Obviously, the Braves were in the World Series or playoffs every year. I think that was 95 first Super Bowl that came to Atlanta, which was the Cowboys, which Billy and I are big Cowboy fans. So we were excited to have the Cowboys here in the Super Bowl. So that time in Atlanta, in our age group, was a blast, and just being such a part of it. We knew everybody. We knew the head of the Sports Council was a friend who'd go out with us. It was a really, really great time. Our other roommate, Craig Hoover, who's still vice president of Live Nation, he was with ProServe. And then who bought them? What was the radio conglomerate that bought ProServe? I know then Live Nation bought them, but there was another entity in between. But Craig's been with them 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
that's really, really cool. The people we met and what they're doing in sports. And, the other thing that's kind of interesting, and this was more, you studied to be a sports professional. That was the start of it. Really, I mean, obviously, Ohio U, I think, was the first
yes.
college in the U.S. that had a master's in sports administration, sports management, what have you. And but a lot of them were glorified PE departments. But Georgia State did a really good job of attracting some of the top budding sports professionals, and that's what drew us to Atlanta. And it was such a good time. And now it's a little bit different. I think people are getting more specific with the spaces they study. Maybe you see more of a trend. The guys go get an MBA to work in Major League Baseball or what. But we really studied sport. I mean, it wasn't as common back then. It was more. I remember telling my grandparents, "Hey, I'm going to study sports administration as a master's." Like, what is that, PE? I'm like, no, not exactly. And then my grandmother could say, "Are you going to be a coach?" I'm like, "No, I'm going to be more than a coach." Now I've been a coach for a long time, but it's funny. But you do have to, even coaching, you need to understand all the sides of what's going on in college and pro sports. It's super important, I think.
So again, you and I personally, we could talk forever. So let's go your timeline. Coaching, your first coaching job, Georgia Perimeter. Am I correct?
Yeah, yeah, and that's another sad one. And going back down memory lane, that was a really beautiful campus. Since then, I think you guys know it's been absorbed, I believe, by Georgia State. That happened, I don't know, roughly about 5 or 6 years ago. And I think it's a little bit sad too. From the community colleges have really decreased, and they're you look back and what community colleges did for a lot of students that maybe couldn't afford school, and it was I really sort of, again, going back, I sort of backed into coaching. That's not what I was looking to do, but I just finished my master's. I was offered a position there to teach as an adjunct professor in the PE department, and also coach the tennis team, and it wasn't a lot of money, and so I get a chance to mentor a lot of young up and coming college coaches today, and they're in a different, such a different generation. They're expecting a lot of money, and you can make a little money in tennis, but not a whole lot. You're not going to get super wealthy, but they're demanding good salaries, and they're getting them. And I remember starting out, what I was making at Georgia Perimeter was more of a stipend, like coaching a high school team, but I made decent money teaching, like we all did, and but I was probably running around like 60, 70 hours a week working, but I loved it. We were young, we could do it. But that was my first gig, and I really in terms of coaching college, and but the good part about it, had a beautiful facility. They were spread out over Atlanta, but I was at the Dunwoody campus. We had 10 courts. We could run alta programs, we could run all kind of instruction. I have some of my guys would get off practice and go help with the junior academy there that we had. I mean, there was so many good things going, so it was a great location to be in. So I look back with great fondness, but it got me going to want to coach. And we ended up, I was there 5 years, but my last 3 years we were fortunate enough to win the national title in my last 3 years. And so and then at that point I was 30, and I was like, well, I really like doing this. I don't want to coach alta for 40 hours a week just to pay the bills. I'd rather do this 100%. And I sort of bypassed all the other career paths I might have had, and just said, I'm all in on this. And then I got an offer to go to Notre Dame to be the assistant, and work for an incredible guy who's probably my main mentor in life now, Coach Bayless, and it was a great experience there. Yeah,
I think that speaks volumes too. That was a great decision, where somebody in your position, coming off 3 national championships, we worked with somebody who shot a little higher. You were smart enough to go as an assistant, and how long were you at Notre Dame?
2 years. Yeah, 2 years. Yeah.
So I mean, that was a great, and then on to Alabama.
Yeah, then 10 years at Alabama, and then now 11 years here. Yeah.
Oh Lord, we are old. God, it was. I remember because I remember we were excited when Alabama was building the new facility. Oh my God.
Yeah. I've been through a lot of facility construction. It seems Alabama, we did 2 different venues. We did an outdoor first right after I arrived, and then we did an indoor, which is actually a funny story, and I'll get back to that. And then we're building a nice facility here, a new facility. We everything, they kind of happen for the same reasons, both at Alabama and Princeton. That you do construction, you start to get sprawl, or you just like a city does, or you need more space, or but it was funny that the story at Alabama, when Saban came in, and everybody was excited. Obviously, I think we saw the opportunity that Saban was going to bring. Alabama had kind of been down in the dumps a little bit on probation in football. And as you know, and I'm talking as a college tennis coach, but any coach in that department would say, hey, look, we need football to be the driver here. I mean, especially a place like Alabama with a tradition. And I was all in on that as well. So we had a 4-court indoor facility at Alabama, which was one of the earlier indoor facilities in college tennis. It was built in '83, where the old coach Ray Perkins' wife loved tennis. So she went to the president, was able to get that. It shared space with the indoor football complex at Alabama. And it was a really high roof, so you could actually punt in it. So that you imagine the tennis, it was you couldn't really hit the ceiling with a lob, but it was a pretty cool 4-court venue. But a massive wall, and on the other side there was a practice football field, turf field, and it stopped at the 5-yard line when it hit that wall, and then the other side went through the end zone. So technically, it was like 105 yards, not 120. Well, Saban does his first tour in the venue, and they're showing him around. He's been obviously well received. They're, showing the facilities, like, hey, what do we need to do? And he's walking through this turf, and I think he likes it, but he gets to the wall and goes, what's on the other side of this wall? And they say, well, it's indoor varsity tennis. And he goes, nicely, I think he goes, move them, give them something, but move them. And and I would tell Coach Saban today that this was a great thing, because he probably knew, he needed his space, but also we needed our space. And so we got to build a new 6-court indoor, which is beautiful. And we did that before I left there. But yeah, really, really cool how these things happen. And the same thing at Princeton right now. They wanted to build a residential college. We need to increase enrollment a little bit. Everybody lives on campus, and it's just kind of tight on campus. So we're moving across the lake on a beautiful space, and we're under construction now on an indoor-outdoor venue here that's going to be state-of-the-art. So I've kind of seen how these things work, and you sort of roll with it, and maybe you get something better, and it's always good.
It's always good. And my last tangent, because we're going to have her on tomorrow. Without Billy, I don't meet PMJ, and those initials were infamous back in the day. And now she's somebody that I've done business with and know, and have grown close with the family over the years. And we'll get her to speak to you about you a bit tomorrow. But again, another impact player in my life, and another close friend of ours, CD. We had a great year last year. Bulldogs won the College Baseball World Series, and TCU, well, we know what happened to TCU, but at least they made it to the finals, which, considering where they started from when I was a freshman, where I think they won one game to making it to the national championship game. That was enough for me. So, but through Billy, I met PMJ too. So Billy's been very instrumental as we gone over. All right, Billy, we were in college athletics. You've been doing it for 25, 27 years now. Tell us, what do you feel about the state of college athletics with the landscape changing, with NIL, transfer portal, conference realignment? Obviously, NIL had a big impact on TCU's success. So I wanted to know, how's it affecting tennis in a positive way, and what are some of the fallbacks?
Yeah, I think it's varied, and unless you're living under a rock, we've had seismic changes in college athletics, and it really trickles down, and it affects every program. Whatever program you are, golf, track and field, volleyball, softball, it doesn't matter. And particularly that we call ourselves the Olympic sports or non-revenue sports. I think one of the biggest things, I saw a really good article yesterday about a lot of people, and this is all phases of life, us blaming the pandemic for things. Okay. And I think college athletics is probably one of the biggest violators of that. You saw programs being dropped, and not just college tennis programs, but a lot of non-revenue programs, because a lot of administrators, quite frankly, freaked out, and they thought, okay, we're gonna lose so much during the pandemic. And yeah, there were some losses, but I think they could have mitigated those losses. They could have found other ways to keep programs, like Minnesota and Iowa men's tennis dropped, and they were in good shape. They were very strong programs, and obviously in the Big Ten, and that's really sad. And I know, it gets more into sometimes a Title IX discussion, but I think there's ways to, people come to the table and figure out what's what. But yeah, I think it's really interesting with a portal. Just looking at college basketball right now, we're entering the Final Four. There's teams that maybe a lot of the commentators have made a point that these mid-major teams like a Florida Atlantic, Creighton, some of these that are really doing well, maybe they're actually the ones that are benefiting from the portal more, because sometimes you think it's going to be the bigger schools, but a lot of the kids, the athletes, and this could be in tennis as well, they come to the Power Fives first. Maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be. You have all the bells and whistles with facilities and funding and travel and all these things for you, but maybe you're not playing, or maybe the coaches are a little bit too much for you, whatever it may be. And so you see kids just jump in the portal. From our standpoint, we don't have that problem for the most part at Princeton, because once you get into Princeton, that's kind of your, say meal ticket, but you value that opportunity you get in an Ivy League institution. You're not generally going to transfer. Now, what we had is we couldn't play. There's an Ivy policy where you can't do graduate school in the Ivy and play intercollegiate athletics. So when everybody got this COVID year, I've got 2 guys playing for UNC right now. They're a top 10 team. They're doing great for them. We'd love to have them. It's kind of sad to watch them flourish at another place, but that's just kind of been the reality. Some of the basketball players that, start on Princeton's Sweet 16 team, if they want, they've got that COVID year. If they're graduating this year, they can go somewhere else. That we have a player in Michigan, in fact, on the basketball team there. So it's happening in all, but it is just, obviously that's going to go away soon. That's going to cycle through with that extra year that COVID granted those athletes. But back to the bigger issue, I just think we're everybody's putting money into football, as you know, and a place like yours, TCU, they're doing really well, and then that money can come and support all the other programs. But what the argument is, and this, like if you have a football team that's trying to compete at the top level, but you're not really the Alabama, the Ohio States, the LSU's, the Clemson that really have the money that's drawing a lot of fans, it could be a money loss for you, obviously. And then that impacts all the non-revenue sports. So for us, and I put college tennis in with all these other non-revenue sports. I mean, we're trying to find our place. We're trying to do things in college tennis to preserve what we have, but also build and try to think a little bit more innovatively in terms of how we can promote ourselves more and be valuable in the department's eyes and not be on the chopping block, and I think if we keep going to where it's just football and basketball based, that's a sad story to tell, and that's not why we have college athletics. So anyway, I get off on my little tangent there myself, but I firmly believe what all the coaches in non-revenue sports are doing, and maybe without the limelight, and I think there's a lot of things we're concerned about in college athletics that we need to sort of rally around and protect, and I'll also think creatively about how we're going to operate in the future.
Well, I think the good part is through challenges come innovation. And I think a lot of the non-revenue producing sports have had to get a little bit more creative to create revenue, to get people to come out. And it helps the entire college experience. So you have an interesting background that you've been in Alabama, and now you're at an Ivy League school. Obviously, big difference. Speak to some of the differences between those two entities.
Yeah, no, I think they are very different, but they're also a lot more similar than people think. I mean, there's their own sort of tradition. Alabama's a big brand, Princeton's a big brand. So how do you leverage those brands? And I think what the thing is with Princeton, I think from an athletic, just a purely athletic standpoint, what we just did in men's basketball is tremendous. And women's basketball won a game too. They've been very good, and that's really visible as well. But for the men's team to make the Sweet 16, everybody kind of rallies around March Madness with these smaller teams, right? Let's say smaller mid-major. They know the ones that don't quite have all the resources, and I think that's really interesting. But that really moves the needle, where there's maybe a few more opportunities to move the needle if you're Alabama, athletically. Academically, it speaks for ourselves, I think. But the difference is, I think with tennis, it's not as much, because tennis players in general, we recruit, just like the guys that recruit Alabama. I recruit a lot of smart guys. I had guys making incredible GPAs, doing wonderful things. Certainly, maybe their degree isn't as strong. It doesn't have the brand of an academic brand of a Princeton. So there's that. I think the biggest difference is the people that you're surrounded by academically. Obviously, nobody gets into an Ivy League institution without a serious intellectual curiosity or showing a lot of ability academically and a desire scholastically to really achieve. So that's probably the biggest difference. But everybody around our student athletes are, very interested in the subject matter for the most part, or they're not going to just slack off, and they can't, or else they'd be out of here, right? So that's probably the biggest thing, I think, and it's a bigger school. It's a big state school versus a private university. But I do love the fact that our guys are truly student athletes. I don't think we had that problem. I don't think that problem exists as much in college tennis. Does it exist in other sports, the revenue sports? Yes, of course. I mean, we've made it where it's just so much of an entry into a pathway to professional sports. And I think I still maintain the amateurism ideology. I really believe in it. I know it was gray 20, 30 years ago, and it's I don't know if it's even gray anymore. I mean, we're paying athletes by this NIL, and so and it's not to say we can't do that at like Princeton. It's very much available to us, and we obviously have some very supportive donors who have the means, the resources, the connections in the business world that we could, I mean, we do have a lot of athletes, taking advantage of NIL deals. I don't think they're anywhere near what some of the Power 5 deals are, but it's helpful. So I think that's the big difference. And obviously we don't do scholarships in the Ivy League, athletic scholarships. So, but the financial aid's really good. And so when you look at men's tennis, there's only 4.5 scholarships. Men's baseball, there's only 11.7. You could still have a roster, just like our baseball coach could have a roster and our tennis team, where we could actually be exceeding that 4.5 in scholarships with the amount of financial aid we're giving out if we're getting the right guy. And we have some with means that don't need the financial aid, but it could work both ways. So it's actually a very fair process. It's just, I think it's harder in some of the sports to recruit when you don't have an athletic scholarship to offer. It's not as hard in tennis though.
Well,
recruiting, Bobby, if I can jump in, and recruiting is one thing, because that's you looking at the potential players. I had an 11-year-old, 12-year-old boy come to me recently, and he said, "Hey, Coach Sean, do you think I can get into Harvard?" And I thought, well, I don't know anything about your educational abilities or your intellectual abilities, your grades. I don't know anything about that. I just found out that he's playing tennis, and he's a beginner. This is not a good tennis player. He's a beginner, and he's just getting started, but he's playing tennis because he believes that on his college resume, so to speak, on his applications, that adds to his ability to get into that type of school. And then he came in the next week. He said, "You know what? I changed my mind, Coach Sean. I'm thinking it's in Duke. I'm thinking Duke is now my target." And I said, "Well, that's great. My stepdaughter just graduated from Duke." He's like, "Oh my gosh, can you please go ask her how she did it?" And the question is, how do you do that? If you're young, I mean, yeah, if you're a 9-year-old and you're top 10 in the country playing tennis, you got a good chance you're already thinking about college tennis. But if you're an 11 or a 12-year-old and you're thinking about going to a school like Princeton, is it recruiting that matters, or is that 12-year-old who may not necessarily be on the team still have that chance? Is his ability to play tennis on his college application, is that helpful at a school like Princeton? Or if you're not going to play college tennis there, it really doesn't matter?
No, I think everything's helpful. I wouldn't, but you could substitute tennis with golf or fencing recreationally or playing the piano or violin. We obviously, a lot of the kids that do enter Princeton are very much, skilled in the arts, if you will. We have so many guys I've had on my teams here that play 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 instruments. It's crazy. Speak many languages. So I think diversifying your resume as much as possible is good. Tennis would be one component of it. There's a lot of kids that try to get in on their own without our support. We get supported opportunities each year where we can have a number of guys we can list that we will help support for admissions, which is, obviously lower than maybe what some of the students or non-athletes getting in, but they've given up so much of their life to be a certain level in a sport. And the level in tennis has gotten to be, for the Ivies, is so high that I would argue, and we have this conversation all the time. I tell parents that are, kids that are maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, they're trying to figure out a pathway for their kid. I'm like, I can't tell them like what's harder. I mean, it may, because you may have injuries, right? You can be really good in tennis nationally when you're 14, but by the time you're 16, what if you kind of fall off a little bit? All of a sudden, now you put all this time into it. Maybe you sacrifice some grades, because if you're traveling most of our guys are traveling all around the US or even all around the globe to pursue their tennis dreams. A lot of them have gone to the online education route or hybrid route to give them the, flexibility to miss some classes, but they have to maintain that. So it's a hard thing to do. I think tennis is one of the hardest to go all in on tennis and decide, okay, I'm going to try to get to XYZ school academically because of my tennis, especially understanding the standard of what we need when all these other things could happen. So what we've actually done, Sean, to your point, is like a lot of guys we're recruiting never thought about Ivies. They didn't even have that dream. We actually, and I'm not saying we talk them into it, but we basically start seeing these kids during their junior year of high school, or maybe right after their sophomore year of high school, and we get their grades, or we kind of understand like they weren't looking at Ivies, but we're like, wow, you could get in if you want to. And then but they weren't thinking Ivies, they were thinking mostly tennis, but they happen to be smart enough. So those are kind of the ones we're seeking, not the ones that from age whatever, they're coming out of the womb, and then all of a sudden their parents are like, you're going to I don't, then there's too competitive now. There's so many people leveraging whatever skills they have in every area of life to get into certain schools. And then the applications are through the roof. So again, not to get off point, but it's really competitive, and it's fun. I think our admissions people have a really tough job because they want a really diverse pool. And it's like we do. I will say this: it's like building a team where they have early action here, like early decisions are made in the fall, and then obviously they take, I think, around roughly half the class, and then they'll take the rest coming up here, I believe, about now, where the regular decision. And so once they get the fall admits, they kind of know what those look like, and then how do they pair them on campus with all of these people. So I think it's like building a team. You want certain cultures, you want certain characters, you want people from all over, from different walks of life. They bring something unique to the university, and you don't want all of one thing. And our team is not all of one thing, nor is our basketball team or football team, which I think is really cool. And I think it's more broad and diverse than it's ever been, which I think is really neat.
And the good part is, I mean, if you look at you're still enjoying successes on the court. Despite you look at the Rices and even Georgia Tech that always complains, well, we have to maintain our grades and stuff to put the same football team out there. You guys have the GPA, and you're very successful.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think people fail to recognize that. I remember taking a history of American sports class as an undergrad, and the Ivies really were at they were really the pioneers with college athletics as they are today. It was more of a privileged group that played athletics. It was truly an amateurism idea at the time, and that's why they've maintained this idea of no athletic scholarships, because they wanted to keep the focus on student athlete. And I think it's great. We have I think roughly 130 to 140 faculty members that are not assigned to teams, but we have, if you look at my coaching page, there's a bunch of other people in there, not only my assistant coaches, but faculty members that support us. They become mentors. So it is a former athletic director that developed this, sort of program many years ago. And it just, you can imagine a school like Princeton, where some professors may not want them missing class, or why are you playing intercollegiate athletics at this level? But they can go on road trips. They become mentors to our athletes. And when you have now 130, 140 of these faculty members across 38, 39 sports, it's really cool. They start to see, wow, they have 20 plus hours a week toward their sport, plus they're doing what all the non-athletes are doing. And I think they respect that. So it's truly, I think the amateurism is well and alive here. I don't know that it is elsewhere, but for our guys to be able to achieve that, it's really cool. But the one thing that's helping us is in tennis in general, like, people want a great education. Most of the tennis players we recruit, even the ones that won't go Ivy, they maybe could, or they're smart enough if they wanted to. We don't lack for good recruits. And I think everybody wants the best. Bobby, when you and I grew up, and Sean, same as you, your parents probably said, just go get a college education, maybe. And they weren't maybe as focused on, hey, you have to get an elite level academic education. And now I feel like there's a lot of pressure. I feel bad for kids, because I think there's a lot of pressure on where they go to school. And let's be honest, a lot of the parents want to say their kid went to XYZ, right? Versus what's best for that individual.
That makes me laugh thinking back, because I don't think back to that time frame, and my parents going, I just hope Sean continues with his school, because I didn't enjoy school personally. It wasn't fun for me. For me, it was social, it was tennis, it was soccer, it was all the things I was doing. But then I remember getting into college, and I remember the other kids, I say, like, the regular kids, right? The non-athletes. And they were complaining. They just didn't have enough time to finish their work, and they couldn't keep up with their studies. I looked at them and said, and you don't play a college sport? Like, how could you possibly not have time to handle all this? I just remember being an athlete and knowing just the schedule was so structured. It was so good for us. We didn't have much time to forget to do something, or to just sit around and all of a sudden realize I was late with something. We had so many other pressures and so many other things going on pushing to say, I got to get this done, or I don't make it to my 5 a.m. workout, or I don't make it to this. And it was just, you got the things done. It was just how it was for the student athletes. And I always just never understood the non-student athletes that didn't seem to have time for everything they needed to do.
Right. You know, and that makes me think, it's kind of funny. I've said this before, and one of the reasons I was really interested in Princeton, you know, I've always, and Bobby's known this for a long time, I've always had a fascination of New York City and living near New York. And if I ever had the opportunity to do what I'm doing at the highest level, and live close to New York or in New York, it'd be great. And then when Princeton opened up a school, but I wanted to pursue it, and I did. But also there were a couple things at work. You know, we had some, as I said, really smart guys at Alabama, and they could make a 3-4 and they could still go out 5 nights a week. And I'm like, they're having a lot of fun. They're chasing the girls, they're doing what they want. It shouldn't be that easy, you know. And I was probably one of the worst in college. You know, I was, you know, having too much fun. I was in a frat, and as Bobby knows, but I didn't want that experience exactly from my student athletes. You know, I wanted a more serious approach, and guys I could trust to do the right thing, and not like we didn't have in Alabama, but you know, I think here the guys are just too busy. It's too rigorous. It's sort of like what you were saying, Sean, the time management becomes essential. And you know, the old adage, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And I tell our guys that all the time. You know, when they think they're sort of like going up against it academically, or they're not sleeping enough, and they just have to manage it a little bit better. And sometimes they need to take a step back, take a day off, you know, from tennis, or take a day off from whatever, and just focus on this, get some rest. And that we have to do that occasionally, but it's really cool how they're able to manage that. And if you really add up the hours in the day, assuming you're sleeping 8 hours, and you know, you still have 16 hours, and maybe 4 hours is tennis, but what else are you doing? And you're not in class that much. It's like 2 or 3 hours a day. So what they do outside of class is the most important thing. Are they playing video games? Probably not that much here. And so they just have a lot less idle time. And so they're able to, focus on what's important. And hopefully for us, that's just, school and tennis.
Well, you're doing a good job. What does it look like this year for NCAAs?
We're on the bubble right now. We've got a big match with Penn. We start Ivy League play on Saturday, and we are really right. I mean, we missed an opportunity last week before last. We were on spring break in San Diego. There's a really good tournament. We played with 8 teams. We were in the last day. We were playing Virginia Commonwealth, which is actually a really good team. They're ranked roughly around 30. I think we were in the 40s at the time of. We were 2 points from winning, and it rained. You know, California's had an enormous amount of rain this year. It's been really tough for them, I know, but it ended up, we were joking, if we didn't play the national anthem, we would have got it in. And so as it turned out, we both had red eyes that night because we had to get back, fly out Sunday night, get back for a class on Monday morning. And so neither team could stay an extra day. So we waited till about 7 o'clock at night. We both teams had to head to the airport. So we didn't get to finish the match. It was like a no contest. That would have been a big one for us. But anyway, we were going to make up that match with somebody else. And but we need to kind of probably, if we don't win the league, obviously, if you win the league, you automatically get a bid. Last year, it was pretty unprecedented, I believe. The first time in history, 4 of the 8 men's teams in tennis made the NCAA, with us being one of them. So it's gotten to be, like I said, an incredibly strong league. So we'll see. We've got some work to do. We've got a young team. We lost 5 seniors. Like I mentioned, a few of them are playing different places. But we've got 4 guys coming this year. Only lose 2 in the fall. So we're building something special, we feel like, and we're excited. Yeah, especially with the new facility coming.
Yeah, well, we've talked about it because I have a player that I coach at South Forsyth who was very interested, and I said, "Well, have you spoken to the coach?" And they always get impressed. I said, "Well, do you want me to call him?" And their eyes light up, and they're like, "Well, what, you know him?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, we were roommates. Do you want me to call him?" And he told me, he said, "Well, I can't get in right now. I have 11 plus UTR, and that's not good enough at Princeton. So you're obviously getting the players."
Yeah, but again, that's just happening with a number. It's not, and I think it's like anything in life. It's like if you apply for a job and you don't get a job, we're all thinking, gosh, what did I do wrong? Or why am I what are my shortcomings? But it's what I've learned in this whole thing with all these applications we get. And, unfortunately, the answer isn't yes very often for a lot of recruits who maybe want to come. And that's unfortunate, just like the admissions process. But it's not really that person to take it personally as much as who you're being compared against. And maybe this person's a better fit for a job or for this particular team or particular university. So, I think it's just hard for anybody to see that. But yeah, we're getting really good players. We're very fortunate. We like to tout this. We've been #1 in undergraduate education for the last 11 years, U.S. News Report, because Princeton's very unique. It's focused on, it's not really known as much for the master's programs, the grad programs, and professional schools. We don't have a business school, law school, or med school. It's all focused on the undergrad, really. And so that's why your first 4 years here, which is when you're playing tennis for us, is great. And so that's a lot of what we talk about, but it's very unique. But yeah, it's been a great selling point, but all the Ivies have a great selling point. The financial aid for all these universities has grown. So for some people who maybe think, okay, they don't offer athletic scholarships, I won't be able to afford to go. If they can get in, they're likely to qualify because the financial aid packages are so generous. I feel like they want to give them out to the right people. It's just a matter of them justifying it and obviously getting in, depending on whether that's athletics or without athletics.
Well, Sean, I know we're getting close on time. Billy, I want to say thanks again. This is a person who's been such a big impact on my life. I still quote by various Billy Pates when you're breaking down a match. Billy told me, look, honestly, you're competing over 10% of the match. We could start in the beginning, 45% is going to each side. I try to tell my players that. I remember when I went into high performance, I called Billy. I said, Billy, I've been coaching high performance. What do I do? Billy, sat down, sent me a list of, which I still have, of drills to use specifically more high performance oriented, but emphasize that the high performance is in the situation, in the effort, not any magical drill. So such a huge part of my life. I'm going to call Junior and let him know that Penn's playing this weekend. Maybe he'll send you a text and start a little rivalry there. And, again, thanks for coming on. Next time, we'll spend a little bit more time on the good times, because I still love the big Vike stories, and we have to make an origin story of that at some point. I can't take credit. That's a Hoover, but we had a lot of good times. And thank you for spending time with us today. Sean, take it away with our last question.
We've got one question we like to ask everyone, and I've been looking forward to this one a lot because of your experience. Atlanta, and Bobby, so you probably know why we're asking a question like this. But I want to give it to you. If you were king of tennis for a day or however long for a certain thing, whether it's college tennis, social tennis, professional tennis, tennis of the universe, whatever it is, you were king of tennis. Is there any one thing, or is there anything you would change or adjust to make tennis better for anyone in any way? You get king of tennis, you get one thing you can do. What would it be?
Yeah, I think you guys have seen the success of the Laver Cup. I think the problem, and Bobby said this many years ago, he remembers like everything I said, and even if it was BS, he seems to remember everything I said back in the day. Maybe I had too many adult beverages, but Bobby always said, we're too focused in tennis on promoting the players and not the sport. And if you think about it, team sports, I use this analogy, I'm right between Philly and New York, but if you're in Philadelphia and the worst guy on the Phillies walks into a restaurant, somebody knows him and they're like, hey, that guy's on the Phillies. He's a Major League Baseball. He might be 700 in the world in baseball. If you're 700 in the world in tennis, you're playing college tennis. So, I think the team approach is really good because it can showcase so many guys. I mean, how many, when you watch a football game, a baseball game, basketball game, how many guys are being showcased? When tennis is on TV, typically, obviously Tennis Channel is doing a good job. Maybe midweek, you see some early round matches and people get to know some other players. But again, it goes back to that thing I said with Atlanta sports or tennis fans, understanding the 50 guy in the world can be just as good as the one guy in the world on a given day. Or if you're a 4-0 player, you're not going to see the subtlety and those differences. So I think making it more team oriented, getting fans around the world to embrace the idea of these teams and taking a part of the ATP and WTA calendar and making more team events. The calendar is grueling enough, and they've made some changes to Davis Cup, but I really think a lot of the events around the world, let's be honest, they have a tough time getting people on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to come to matches. Yeah, you see the finals, it's packed, but I think with the exception of a few events, I think some of these events are struggling financially. So make it more of a team event. You involve more people. You showcase the sport at a greater level, and then we need more exposure via whether it's even streaming. I know we talk a lot about linear TV. That's really important. We talked about that a lot in college tennis, but the streaming, it should be a good streaming. It should be the ability for anybody to get tennis live any time. So I think those two things are super important. If I were king of tennis, that's what I would try to do, make it more team oriented. That's coming from a college coach where I believe in culture and team camaraderie and being a little bit more unselfish. But I think tennis needs more of that.
I knew we'd get a good answer out of you. I really appreciate it. And Bobby, Billy, I know you guys could talk forever, but let's schedule another time because I know we've got plenty of questions, plenty of stories to tell.
Yeah,
we will make sure we get you in. Especially, we want to talk again after the college season, see how it went, and then also ask. I've got a bunch of questions about what Universal Tennis is doing with stream. You said streaming's a good thing. They're doing the national championships or the NIT on Prime, and they're doing some cool stuff. And we want to kind of get your thoughts on a lot of that. But we
didn't even get to ask him about VR tennis.
Well, that's the thing. We got to go talk to those guys right now. But we really appreciate your time, Billy, and we will definitely stay in touch. I know you talk to Bobby a lot, so I'm sure you won't be very far away.
Yeah, great, guys. I really appreciate what you're doing for tennis, and I really appreciate you having me on. It's great. It's a great endeavor you have, and I wish you all the best.
Mike, I'm proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Proud of you guys. All right.
Thanks, Billy. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Talk to you soon, brother. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Yeah. Bye-bye.
You too, man. Should we just stay on?
Well, I don't know. Then I gotta start the recording again.
Yeah.
I gotta figure that out. That's a strange thing. I just gotta leave I would like a separate thing. So I'm actually gonna stop. We're gonna say goodbye on Instagram. And we're right at 11. So that way we'll have separate recordings and feeds, and I need to add all those captions, and maybe I can do that afterwards. All right, we're gonna do that. Then we're gonna go live again. All right, so we will admit in Mark. Yeah, let's just close the chat. Oh, the chat's gonna stay. That's the problem. All right, let me shut down the Zoom.
Okay.
Hopefully,
So go back
Mark
on.
will stay. Hopefully, Mark will stay in the waiting room, and I'll start it back over again. That way, we can just make sure we got everything right.
So I'm going to shut down and go back to his.
You're gonna log